As Dr. Eleanor Cross activated the alien artifact, she had no idea the consequences it would bring. The glowing crystal, ancient and covered in cryptic symbols, pulsed with a soft hum as it responded to the touch of human hands for the first time in millennia. The room around her shifted, the walls humming in resonance with the artifact's power. The energy coursed through her, filling her mind with clarity and possibilities she'd never imagined. For a brief, thrilling moment, she could understand the vast interconnections of the universe, grasping at the fabric of reality itself. Within hours, Dr. Cross shared her findings with the rest of the world. Governments scrambled to form teams of the brightest minds, studying the artifact's properties. At first, the focus was on its technological marvel, how it could enhance human cognition, allow for faster-than-light travel, and revolutionize energy sources. But soon, the true potential of the artifact became apparent. It could alter the very structure of human biology. Minds sharpened, reflexes heightened, and the physical limits of the human body began to break down. The first human volunteers were subjected to the artifact's energy, and the results were immediate. Soldiers, scientists, and even athletes found themselves faster, smarter, and stronger. The ripple effects were swift. Across the world, nations shifted in response to the realization that humanity's potential had been fundamentally changed. A new arms race had begun, but it wasn't for nuclear weapons or space fleets. It was for mastery of the artifact's powers. Governments, now fearful of each other's newfound strengths, began to prepare for conflict. Yet, as Earth's military forces tested their enhanced capacities, the first major consequence of the artifact's power became apparent. In a skirmish over an interstellar trade route, a human warship, now far more advanced than any other in existence, decimated an entire alien fleet. The humans were not simply stronger. They were evolving faster than anyone could predict. News of this victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The universe was full of ancient civilizations with untold power, yet the human race, once a fledgling species in the cosmos, had just outperformed them in a matter of months. But not all of humanity's neighbors saw this as a sign of hope. The first diplomatic mission from the Galactic Council arrived soon after, an alliance of the oldest and most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They came to Earth in sleek starships, their sleek designs and imposing presence intimidating in their own right. The humans watched, tense and expectant, as their representatives filed into the massive conference hall. They were here to discuss one thing: humanity's place in the galaxy. The lead emissary, a towering Kellian named Amarth, addressed the gathered leaders with cold precision. "The relic you have discovered is not a gift," he warned, his voice resonating with an ancient authority. "It is a key, and it opens doors that could lead to your undoing. You are not the first species to encounter it, nor will you be the last. But you are the youngest and least prepared for what lies beyond." His words were ominous, and as he spoke, a chill swept through the room. The Kellian had ruled the galaxy for centuries, their influence felt in every corner of the universe. They were the gatekeepers of peace and balance. Until now, they saw humanity as a chaotic, unpredictable force, one that threatened the delicate equilibrium they had maintained for eons. "We do not offer warnings lightly," Amarth continued. "You have no understanding of what you have unleashed. If you proceed with this power, you will awaken forces that may be beyond even your control. Stay out of the galactic conflict, or we will ensure you are extinguished." The message was clear. The Kellian would not tolerate humanity's rise. But as the emissary left, their ship gliding smoothly into the cold blackness of space, humanity's leaders sat in stunned silence. Some saw the Kellian's warning as a challenge, a test of their newfound strength. Others understood the gravity of the situation, realizing they were standing on the precipice of something much larger than they had ever imagined. The galaxy was not just a place of exploration. It was a battleground, and humanity had just been thrust into the heart of it. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. As the Kellian ship departed, Dr. Cross, still deeply attuned to the artifact, felt a strange shift in the air. The relic's power surged once more, this time sending a ripple through the galaxy. Something ancient and far more dangerous had noticed humanity's presence. It was only a matter of time before the next move was made. The Kellian's warning echoed in the minds of humanity's leaders, but they had little time to dwell on it. The galaxy was vast, and while many alien species had yet to take humanity seriously, others saw opportunity in humanity's sudden rise. The first true test of their power came unexpectedly, and in the most brutal of ways. The HFY, a ruthless and technologically advanced insectoid species known for their aggressive expansionist policies, launched a sudden attack on one of humanity's outer colonies. A peaceful agricultural settlement on the planet Sirius IV, far from Earth's protective gaze, was caught in their crosshairs. The HFY sought to enslave the human inhabitants and harvest the planet's resources, as they had done with countless other civilizations across the galaxy. The attack was swift and merciless, catching the humans by surprise. They had only a small fleet stationed near the colony, a handful of vessels barely equipped to withstand an assault by such a brutal force. But what the HFY didn't account for was humanity's new ability to adapt. Captain Eli Ward, the commander of the human fleet, was the first to grasp the potential of their newfound powers. As a seasoned military officer, he recognized that traditional tactics wouldn't work against the HFY. The battle began with humanity on the defensive, but it quickly became clear that humans, armed with their rapidly evolving technology and the artifacts' enhancements, were no longer the underdogs. Captain Ward made the decision to implement a radical strategy, to use the HFY's own tactics against them. Humanity's newly enhanced combat abilities allowed them to study and mirror the enemy's moves with terrifying precision. They started by exploiting the HFY's weaknesses. Alien technology was not as infallible as they believed. With their newly designed warships, powered by the artifact's energy, humanity launched a surprise counterattack. Captain Ward's flagship, the Crimson Dawn, a sleek battleship enhanced with the artifact's technology, led the charge. The human fleet, equipped with weapons that could warp space and time on a small scale, deployed the first experimental pulse cannon. The weapon, capable of focusing energy into a concentrated shockwave, was humanity's first real demonstration of the artifact's destructive potential. The cannon fired with devastating effect. The HFY's lead ship, a towering dreadnought, was vaporized in an instant. The sheer force of the blast sent shockwaves through the battlefield, causing several of the HFY's secondary ships to lose their structural integrity. The HFY, stunned and disoriented, faltered in their assault. But the victory didn't come without a cost. The HFY retaliated with brutal force, deploying thousands of combat drones to overwhelm the human defenses. The human soldiers, now enhanced in both mind and body, fought fiercely, but the HFY's numbers were overwhelming. For every HFY ship destroyed, 3 more seemed to appear. However, it was in the moment of desperation that humanity's true strength became clear. The soldiers' enhanced reflexes, sharpened senses, and heightened coordination allowed them to react to threats faster than any of the HFY could anticipate. They began to pick off key targets, enemy command ships, power cores, and supply lines. The tide turned as the HFY found themselves slowly losing their grip. In the final stages of the battle, Captain Ward deployed a devastating tactic. Using their ability to manipulate energy, the humans created a temporary rift in space, a localized distortion that sucked in the remaining HFY warships. The rift closed, taking the ships with it, and leaving nothing but emptiness where once there had been a formidable alien fleet. The humans, now standing victorious, had dealt their first blow to one of the galaxy's most feared species. The HFY, humiliated, retreated in disarray, their forces shattered and scattered across the stars. Yet, despite their victory, humanity's newfound power brought with it a chilling realization. They had defeated a mighty foe, but the galaxy was vast, and many of the other species were far more dangerous than the HFY. As word of the battle spread, the reactions from the rest of the galaxy were swift and mixed. Some alien civilizations, once confident in their superiority, began to look at humanity with growing suspicion. Others, like the Kellion, saw the potential for an unstoppable force and began to plan accordingly. They knew that if humans could wield the artifact's power unchecked, the balance of the galaxy would be forever altered. But it was not just the galaxy's older, established species that took notice. A new faction began to rise, one composed of the alien races that humanity had freed from the grip of tyrants like the Neri and the HFY. These races, once enslaved and oppressed, saw humanity as a beacon of hope, a sign that they, too, could be free from the cruel powers that had long ruled the galaxy. They began to look to humanity not just as a military force, but as a symbol of rebellion and change. Captain Ward, while celebrating his victory, knew the real challenge had only just begun. The galaxy had been shaken, and humanity was now caught in the middle of a game far larger than they had ever imagined. The balance of power was shifting, and humanity's role in it was far from certain. As humanity's leaders gathered to plan their next steps, they faced a difficult choice. Would they continue down this path of conquest, using the artifact's power to reshape the galaxy? Or would they take the risk of stepping back and trying to forge peace with the very civilizations they had just fought? Either way, the future of the galaxy was now in their hands. In the wake of humanity's unexpected victory over the HFY, the galaxy stood at the brink of something far greater. News of the battle spread like wildfire across the cosmos, reaching even the most distant corners of space. The humans had proven themselves to be more than mere survivors. They were now a force to be reckoned with, one capable of reshaping the very balance of power. The Galactic Council, a centuries-old alliance of the galaxy's most advanced and influential civilizations, convened an emergency session. Led by the Kellion, an ancient and enigmatic species who had long held sway over the galaxy's affairs, the Council had always prided itself on maintaining order and peace. But now, with humanity emerging as a potential superpower, their carefully crafted balance was in jeopardy. The Kellion's lead representative, Amarth, was not one to tolerate threats to their rule lightly. In his eyes, humanity's rise was not just an inconvenience, it was a dire challenge. They had dared to disrupt the established order, and that could not go unpunished. Amarth's voice was cold as he addressed the assembled council members. Humanity is not just an annoyance. They are an existential threat to our way of life. We cannot allow them to continue unchallenged. Behind him, several other species nodded in agreement, their faces grim. The HFY, their pride wounded, had already begun to regroup, but the damage to their reputation was severe. In contrast, humanity had shown unparalleled resilience and ingenuity. Their warships, once primitive, had been transformed into weapons of immense power, and their soldiers, enhanced by the relic, were unmatched in combat. Amarth's declaration was followed by the formation of a coalition to deal with humanity. The Kellion, the HFY, and several other influential factions, the Mentor, a race of sentient gas giants, and the Tirith, a telepathic species who could manipulate emotions, would band together to curb humanity's growing influence. The alliance was not just a show of military strength, it was a message. The galaxy would not be ruled by the upstart humans. Humanity, however, was not blind to the growing threat. Captain Eli Ward, still celebrated as a hero from the HFY conflict, now found himself at the center of a much larger struggle. The newly formed United Earth government, backed by their rapidly growing fleet, recognized that the galaxy was no longer a safe place. The Kellion and their allies had made it clear that they were prepared to fight, and fight they would. But even as tensions rose, humanity's leaders knew they could not simply rely on brute force. The artifact's power was undeniable, but it had limits. The sheer number of forces the coalition could summon was staggering. If the humans were to have any hope of surviving this galactic conflict, they would need more than just advanced technology. They would need allies. In the days that followed, a secret diplomatic mission was dispatched to the farthest reaches of known space. Led by Alexander Tiberius, a charismatic human diplomat and former war hero, the mission's objective was clear: convince the galaxy's oppressed races to join humanity's cause. The promise of liberation from the ancient powers that had long subjugated them was a powerful rallying cry. Tiberius's mission was met with mixed reactions. Some of the enslaved species, like the Lorxians, a race of telepathic beings once enslaved by the Kellian, were eager to ally with humanity. The Lorxians, having suffered under the yoke of the Kellian for centuries, saw the humans as their potential saviors. They were not alone in this sentiment. The Neri, a race of giant aquatic beings who had been systematically exterminated by the HFY, also saw in humanity a chance for vengeance and freedom. Other species, however, were more hesitant. The Tyrith, who had once controlled the emotions of entire populations, view humanity's sudden rise with suspicion. Could humans be trusted not to become the very thing they had overthrown? They had seen this pattern before. Empires born from rebellion often became just as tyrannical as those they replaced. They demanded proof that humanity's intentions were pure. Back on Earth, the United Earth government prepared for the inevitable conflict. The human fleet, bolstered by the artifact's power and the first signs of alien allies, began training rigorously for a war that was now unavoidable. Captain Ward, although a decorated leader, was deeply aware of the stakes. He was no longer just leading humanity in battle. He was now the symbol of their future. Despite the growing alliances, the battlefronts were taking shape. A skirmish occurred on the edge of human space when a Mentor scout ship, in a desperate move to test humanity's capabilities, ventured too close to a heavily guarded human sector. The confrontation was brief but decisive. The Mentor fleet, not fully understanding humanity's new technological edge, underestimated the humans' tactical genius. In a series of coordinated strikes, the human fleet, using precise and devastating energy weapons, crippled the Mentor vessels, forcing them into retreat. The message was clear: humanity was not to be underestimated. But as the first true galactic conflict began to unfold, the question remained: was humanity prepared to shoulder the weight of a war that could span the entire galaxy? Could they maintain their ideals in the face of overwhelming odds? Or would they fall into the same traps as the old empires that had ruled before them? With the alliances in place and the first battles won, humanity's future was uncertain. One thing, however, was undeniable: the galaxy would never be the same again. As the galaxy descended into full-scale war, humanity found itself at the heart of a conflict far larger than anyone could have anticipated. What began as a desperate bid for survival had now become a struggle for dominance, and the choices humanity made in the coming months would shape the future of the entire galaxy. Captain Eli Ward, now promoted to admiral, found himself facing a new reality. The war had grown fiercer with every passing day, and though humanity's allies were beginning to rally, the forces arrayed against them were overwhelming. The Kellian, with their ancient and vast power, were calculating and ruthless in their methods. The HFY, embittered by their defeat, were looking for revenge, their fleets scared but unbroken. The Mentor, having suffered their own humiliating defeat, were now building a formidable armada. But it wasn't just the military might of the galaxy's old powers that humanity had to contend with. It was the increasingly complex web of alliances and betrayals. Each faction had its own motives, and even the human allies they had so carefully courted were not without their agendas. While the Lorxians eagerly threw their support behind humanity, the Tyrith, although technically allies, remained cautious, often withholding critical intelligence or strategic support. They had a deep distrust of humanity's rapid rise and feared that the humans might one day be no different than the empires that had oppressed them. Still, humanity's resolve was unshaken. The strategic advantage of the artifact's technology, combined with the ingenuity of human commanders, began to shift the momentum in their favor. Humans were not just reacting to the threats of the galaxy. They were becoming the architects of their own future. Admiral Ward was on the front lines of this change. His fleet, now equipped with weapons of unimaginable power, became known as the Phantom Force, due to their ability to strike swiftly and disappear before the enemy could mount a meaningful response. The human warships, designed for agility and surprise, hit their targets with devastating precision. With their newfound allies, especially the Lorxians, humanity began to push back against the coalition of ancient powers. The turning point came during the Battle of Talmaris, a crucial system on the galactic frontier. The Kellion had hoped to crush humanity's offensive and drive them back into their own space. They had gathered a fleet of overwhelming numbers, and all seemed lost for the humans. But Admiral Ward had one final gambit. Using advanced intelligence, gathered from the Tirith's unwillingness to fully share their resources, Ward discovered a flaw in the Kellion's heavily fortified flagship, the Torathus, a massive warship that was said to be indestructible. Its defenses were formidable, but there was one crucial weakness, a small but critical gap in the ship's energy shields, one that was nearly impossible to detect without close inspection. It was a flaw the Kellion, in their centuries of dominance, had long ignored. Ward formulated a plan to strike at the heart of the Kellion fleet. He would lead a small strike force, using the element of surprise to penetrate the enemy's defenses. The gamble was risky. If they failed, humanity's resistance would be shattered. But the artifact's powers had already proven their worth, and with the help of the Lorxians' telepathic abilities, Ward had a glimmer of hope. As the battle unfolded, the human fleet lured the Kellion into an ambush. Their ships, enhanced by the artifact, seemed to move like shadows, evading detection while causing chaos within the Kellion ranks. The Kellion's tactics, once considered flawless, began to falter. For the first time in centuries, they were being outwitted. Then, in the heat of the battle, the human strike force made their move. Ward's flagship, the Crimson Dawn, led the charge, its pulse cannons cutting through enemy ships with deadly accuracy. At the heart of the Kellion fleet, Ward's forces breached the Torathus's outer defenses. It was a fierce and brutal confrontation. Human soldiers stormed the Kellion flagship's hull, fighting tooth and nail to reach the heart of the ship. Amid the chaos, Ward himself led a boarding party. They fought their way through the Kellion ship's labyrinthine corridors, their enhanced strength and speed giving them an edge over the ancient species soldiers. As they reached the central reactor, Ward faced one final obstacle, the Kellion High Commander, a towering figure whose psychic abilities made him nearly invincible. The two clashed in an intense battle, a fight not just of physical prowess but of wills. The Kellion, with centuries of mental discipline, attempted to break Ward's mind, to overwhelm him with visions of defeat and despair. But Ward, infused with the artifact's power, resisted. His human mind was unlike anything the Kellion had encountered. With a final, brutal strike, Ward shattered the High Commander's psychic shield and disabled the reactor. The Torathus exploded in a violent burst of energy, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Kellion forces, thrown into disarray, began to retreat. The battle was a crushing victory for humanity. The implications of Talmaris were enormous. Not only had humanity struck a decisive blow against the Kellion, but they had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's mightiest powers and emerge victorious. Word of the human triumph spread across the stars, and the balance of power began to shift. But while humanity celebrated their victory, the cost of war weighed heavily. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed, and the question remained, would humanity be able to wield its newfound power without becoming the very thing they had fought against? The victory at Talmaris had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, but it was only the beginning of what would become the most devastating conflict in the universe's history. Humanity, now firmly entrenched as a power to be reckoned with, had forged alliances and secured its place on the galactic stage. Yet, as the war raged on, the cost of survival became more apparent with every passing day. Admiral Eli Ward, now a hero to many but a reluctant leader, could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. The war had escalated beyond what anyone had predicted. What had started as a struggle against the old empires was now a battle for the future of the galaxy itself. Humanity had dealt a significant blow to the Killian, but that victory had come with its own set of consequences. The other galactic powers, particularly the HFY and the Untor, saw humanity as an immediate threat, one that had to be eliminated before their influence spread any further. The Killian, though reeling from their defeat, were far from defeated. Their retreat from Talmaris was not a sign of surrender, but of regrouping. They were an ancient species, with millennia of experience in war and manipulation. They began to rally the remaining forces of the Galactic Council, appealing to those who had long feared humanity's rapid rise. The Killian understood that the destruction of their flagship had been a temporary setback, but they knew humanity's rise could not be ignored. They began to pull strings, rallying factions like the Tirith and the Neri into a new coalition designed to crush humanity's growing influence. On the other side of the conflict, humanity's allies, the Lorxians, the Neri, and even smaller factions, were beginning to feel the strain. The war was taking its toll on everyone, and the promises of liberation that had originally united them were starting to fade. The Tirith, though technically allies, had become increasingly distant, withholding support and acting as though they had no stake in the outcome. Humanity, now in the midst of a full-scale war, needed their allies more than ever, but the cost of their participation in this galactic upheaval was mounting. Meanwhile, on Earth, the situation was no less dire. The United Earth government, which had once been the epitome of unity, was beginning to fracture. The war had stretched the resources of humanity to their breaking point. The original dream of galactic peace had begun to sour as dissent grew within the ranks. Some factions of humanity, emboldened by their victories, began to question whether the galaxy was worth fighting for at all. They argued that humanity should turn inward and focus on consolidating its power within its own borders, no longer engaging in the struggles of distant alien species. Others, however, were driven by a desire to spread the ideals of freedom and independence, even if it meant continuing the war. Admiral Ward, caught between the pressures of war and the fractures within humanity itself, found himself questioning his own leadership. The victories they had won, the alliances they had forged, seemed fragile in the face of the immense challenges ahead. Humanity was now caught in a delicate balance. Would they continue their fight against the galaxy's powers, or would they turn inward and seek peace at any cost? The decision was made for them when a fleet of Mentor warships, now reinforced and emboldened by the support of the Killian, launched a direct assault on Earth's home system. The Untor, once humbled in earlier engagements, had rebuilt their forces with a vengeance. Their immense gas giant ships, capable of manipulating gravitational fields, descended on Earth's orbital defenses like a massive storm. Their superior firepower overwhelmed the human fleet in the first moments of the attack, leaving Earth defenseless. This was the moment humanity had been dreading. The Mtor's plan was clear. They would cripple Earth's military capability, severing humanity's ability to continue the war. If they succeeded, humanity would be isolated, vulnerable, and forced into submission. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Alexander Tiberius, the human diplomat turned warrior, pushed for a drastic course of action. He proposed a counteroffensive, one that would use humanity's full arsenal of experimental technology, the very technology that had allowed them to defeat the HFY and other adversaries. The humans had developed a new type of weapon, capable of manipulating space-time itself, but it came with significant risks. If deployed, it could potentially tear a hole in space, with unknown consequences for the entire solar system. Despite the risks, Ward, driven by the need to defend Earth and end the war once and for all, authorized the use of the weapon. The Aegis Protocol, as it was called, was humanity's final gambit. As the Mtor fleet moved closer to Earth's defenses, humanity's last-ditch effort began. The Crimson Dawn led the charge, with Ward at its helm. The Aegis Protocol was activated, and space around Earth began to warp. Gravity fields bent, stars seemed to shimmer in unnatural ways, and a distortion filled the sky. The human fleet, now empowered by the artifact and the risky new weapon, launched their full barrage at the Mtor flagship, which loomed larger with every passing second. The resulting explosion was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Mtor flagship shattered into countless fragments, and the shockwave spread out, crippling the rest of their fleet in an instant. But the cost was catastrophic. The weapon had destabilized the very fabric of space around Earth, and it was unclear whether the planet itself had been spared. Humanity had won another victory, but at a terrible price. Earth's future, and the future of the galaxy, was now uncertain. Was the Aegis Protocol the key to humanity's ultimate victory, or had they unleashed something far more dangerous than they could control? The aftermath of the Aegis Protocol was nothing short of catastrophic. Though humanity had dealt a crippling blow to the Mtor fleet, the weapon's unintended consequences were immediate and severe. The shockwave of space-time distortion caused by the weapon's detonation left the solar system in a state of disarray. Time and space themselves seemed to tremble. Planets shook with unnatural forces, and space around Earth became dangerously unstable, with rifts in reality opening unexpectedly. The sun flickered, momentarily dimming before returning to its normal state, but the lingering effects of the distortion left humanity scrambling to comprehend the damage done. Admiral Eli Ward, aboard the Crimson Dawn, watched in grim silence as the consequences of the Aegis Protocol unfolded. Earth had survived, but for how long? The war against the galaxy's remaining superpowers was far from over, and humanity's unchecked use of such powerful technology had drawn both praise and condemnation from the galaxy at large. In the days following the battle, the Galactic Council convened once again. The Kellyan, now more desperate than ever, called for an immediate response. The use of a weapon capable of altering the very structure of space was beyond anything they had anticipated. To the Kellyan, this wasn't just an act of war. It was an affront to the natural order of the galaxy. Their representative, Amarth, now stood before the council, his voice cold and unyielding. "We cannot allow this to continue," Amarth declared. "Humanity has demonstrated that they will stop at nothing to win. They have broken the most sacred laws of the galaxy. The balance is shattered, and the consequences of their actions will be catastrophic for everyone." The council was divided. Some argued that humanity had merely done what was necessary to protect their world, while others feared that this reckless use of power could threaten the very existence of the galaxy. The Tyreth, who had been cautious in their dealings with humanity from the start, now voiced their concerns openly. "The humans have shown us their strength," said Vorel, the Tyreth representative. "But what will stop them from becoming the very tyrants they sought to overthrow? The galaxy cannot risk giving them unchecked power. If they continue down this path, they will not only conquer the galaxy, they will undo it." In response, the Kellyan and their allies began to mobilize, preparing for what they called the final reckoning. This new coalition sought to impose order and prevent humanity from further destabilizing the galaxy. With the Aegis Protocol as the central issue, they were determined to ensure that no other species would dare to use such destructive power again. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's old empires were unified, not by peace, but by fear. On Earth, however, humanity's leaders were at odds. The Aegis Protocol had been a desperate measure, but it had worked. Despite the devastation it had caused, it had forced the galaxy's superpowers to reconsider their approach to humanity. The war, which had seemed like a series of unending skirmishes, had now escalated to an all-out galactic confrontation. But at what cost? Admiral Ward knew that Earth could not afford to continue fighting in this reckless manner. The risks were too high, the stakes too great. Humanity had fought its way to this point, but now they were on the verge of becoming the very thing they had fought against. The use of the Aegis Protocol had sent a message to the galaxy that humanity was willing to go to any length to survive, but at what cost to their soul? As the galaxy's leaders prepared for the upcoming war, a new faction emerged, one that had been quietly growing in the shadows. The Free Systems Alliance, a coalition of smaller alien races that had long been oppressed by the Kellian and their allies, now turned to humanity for aid. These races, who had once been enslaved or ignored, saw in humanity a new hope. The Lorxians, the Neri, and even a few defectors from the Tyrith began to rally behind the human cause. They knew that the only way to challenge the might of the Kellian and their allies was to unite under one banner, and humanity had proven to be the strongest force in the galaxy. Alexander Tiberius, the charismatic diplomat who had once brokered fragile alliances, now found himself on the front lines, leading humanity's efforts to solidify its position as the centerpiece of the Free Systems Alliance. His mission was clear: to unite the galaxy's oppressed races, to build a coalition strong enough to confront the Kellians' growing war machine. "The galaxy is fractured," Tiberius said in a speech to the Free Systems Alliance. "But we don't have to let it remain that way. We have shown that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. Together, we can change the course of this war. Together, we can win." But as the new alliance grew stronger, the internal divisions within humanity deepened. The call for peace, to end the war and focus on rebuilding Earth, became louder. Many on Earth felt that the galaxy had already paid too much, and the Aegis Protocol had been a dangerous gamble. Could they really maintain the moral high ground if they continued fighting? Could they become the galaxy's saviors without becoming its conquerors? Admiral Ward, still haunted by the consequences of his decisions, found himself torn between his duty to his people and the growing realization that humanity's future might not lie in the war they had started, but in a fragile, difficult peace. With the galaxy divided and the war entering its darkest phase, humanity's fate hung in the balance. Would they be the champions of a new order, or the destroyers of everything they had fought to protect? The galaxy was on the edge of collapse, with humanity now in possession of unimaginable power and their allies rallying behind them. The pressure to act decisively mounted. The Aegis Protocol, despite its success in defeating the Mtor fleet, had left behind a trail of devastation that the galaxy could not ignore. Humanity was now more powerful than ever, but at what cost? Admiral Eli Ward, once a symbol of hope and unity, now found himself questioning everything. The war had transformed him from a strategist to a reluctant leader, burdened by the weight of choices that no one should have to make. He had stood at the helm of humanity's rise, leading them to victory after victory. But each victory had come with consequences. The galaxy had watched as humanity harnessed the very forces of space and time, using them to carve a path of destruction. And now, they were faced with the prospect of either continuing down this path or stepping back before they lost everything. The Council of Galactic Powers, still reeling from the devastation wrought by humanity's actions, had called for an emergency summit. The Kellian, the Ekshakar, and the Mtor had all sent representatives, but it was clear that the tension in the room was palpable. Humanity's actions could not be overlooked, and many of the galaxy's powers felt they were at a crossroads. Amarth, the Kellian representative, stood at the forefront, his voice dripping with cold disdain. "The galaxy cannot survive with a power like humanity in it. Your Aegis Protocol has shown that you are willing to destroy anything, anyone, in your pursuit of victory. You have broken the natural balance of the universe. If you are allowed to continue, it will not be long before you turn that power inward and annihilate us all." But humanity was not without its champions. The Lorxians, who had once been among the galaxy's most oppressed species, now stood firmly beside the humans. Their leader, Tarek, had witnessed humanity's potential firsthand. "We are no longer a fractured collection of nations and peoples. Humanity has proven that it will fight for its survival and for the survival of those who are oppressed. The time has come for the galaxy to make a choice. We either unite with humanity or remain at the mercy of the old empires." The debate raged on for hours, with each faction taking its turn to plead its case. But as the arguments grew more impassioned, it became clear that the galaxy's future was no longer something that could be decided by diplomacy alone. Humanity had, for better or worse, become the galaxy's focal point, a symbol of both hope and fear. Amidst the chaos, Tiberius stood silently at the back of the room, watching the proceedings unfold. The Free Systems Alliance had been growing in strength, but it was clear that not all of humanity's newfound allies were comfortable with the path they were taking. The Tsirith, who had once been hesitant to fully align with humanity, were now beginning to question their involvement. They feared that the more humanity advanced, the more likely they would become the very thing they had once opposed. Tiberius knew what had to be done. The galaxy needed to see humanity's true face, not just the destructive power that had so terrified their enemies, but the ideals they had once stood for. He knew the Aegis Protocol had been a mistake, and the galaxy could never accept humanity's continued use of such weapons. If they were to survive, humanity had to prove that they were not conquerors, but liberators. At the summit's close, Tiberius addressed the gathered representatives, his voice firm but resolute. The war has cost us more than we ever imagined. Humanity's rise has come at the expense of far too many lives, and the consequences of our actions will echo across the stars for generations. But we will not continue this path. We will lay down our weapons. We will work to rebuild what has been destroyed. And we will seek peace, on our terms. We will not be the oppressors. We will be the guardians of the galaxy's future. His words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the anger and fear that had dominated the proceedings. For the first time, humanity was offering a path to peace, a promise that they would not allow their power to destroy what they had fought to protect. But whether the galaxy was ready to trust them again was another matter entirely. As the summit adjourned, Ward, Tiberius, and the other human leaders gathered in a private chamber. The decision had been made. The Aegis Protocol would be abandoned, and humanity would shift its focus toward rebuilding and repairing the damage they had caused. But the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Trust, once shattered, would not be easily restored. "I fear the galaxy may never forgive us," Ward said, his voice heavy with regret. Tiberius looked out at the stars, his face a mask of determination. "It doesn't matter. We've made our choice. Now we have to prove we can live with it." But the question remained, could humanity truly turn its back on the power it had gained? Would the galaxy accept them, or would the scars of war and the legacy of the Aegis Protocol be too much to overcome? The galaxy's fate now hung on a delicate thread. Humanity had the chance to rewrite its future, but whether they would seize it or fall into the same darkness they had once fought against was uncertain. Humanity had made its decision. The Aegis Protocol, the weapon that had reshaped the very fabric of space and time, was to be sealed away, never to be used again. The galaxy, still reeling from the devastation, had been given a glimpse of what humanity could become, not just conquerors, but potential saviors. But that trust, once fractured, could not be easily restored. The scars of war ran deep, and the road to healing would be a long one. Admiral Eli Ward, now stripped of his title as the military leader of a galactic empire, found himself reflecting on his actions. The victories, the strategic brilliance, the power they had accumulated, it all seemed distant now. What had it been for? Had humanity truly saved the galaxy, or had they only exacerbated its divisions? His hands, still weathered from battle, trembled as he looked out at the stars, once symbols of limitless potential, now reminders of a war he had never intended to fight. In the wake of the summit, the galaxy's most powerful factions had taken a fragile first step toward reconciliation. The Kellian, Shakar, Mentor, and even the Tyrith had reluctantly agreed to a ceasefire, though each race still watched humanity with suspicion. Trust would take time, and for many, humanity's promises of peace were nothing more than a desperate ploy to save their own skin. But there was something different now. Humanity had offered the galaxy a way forward, not through domination, but through cooperation. The Free Systems Alliance, led by humans, had become the central force advocating for lasting peace. The Lorxians, the Neri, and other oppressed races had rallied behind them, hoping that humanity's struggle for freedom could offer them the same opportunity. Despite the tumultuous atmosphere, there were those within humanity who were determined to make this new vision a reality. Captain Alexander Tiberius, now at the forefront of the diplomatic efforts, had traveled from one system to another, engaging in negotiations with the galaxy's leaders. His message was simple: we are not here to rule. We are here to rebuild. The galaxy has suffered long enough. We stand for a future of equality, where no race is oppressed or destroyed in the pursuit of power. As Tiberius made his rounds across the galaxy, Earth itself was undergoing a quiet transformation. The once divided United Earth government had united under a single banner, focused on the long-term vision of peace. The government, while still weary from the war, began redirecting resources from military endeavors into rebuilding the damaged infrastructure of Earth and its allies. They began offering humanitarian aid to the devastated systems they had once fought against, reaching out to those they had harmed in the conflict. But it wasn't just the governments that had changed. The people of Earth, who had once been so consumed by the need to expand and dominate, began to embrace a new ideal, a shared sense of responsibility for the galaxy's future. People volunteered, offering their expertise in diplomacy, agriculture, and technology to help rebuild the war-torn regions. Humanity had learned, painfully, that true power came not from destruction, but from unity and collaboration. However, peace was not yet assured. The scars of war ran deep, and despite humanity's efforts to make amends, there were still factions, on both sides of the conflict, that refused to accept a future of cooperation. The Kellian, embittered by their losses and still convinced that humanity posed an existential threat, began organizing secret meetings, determined to thwart any lasting peace. The remnants of the Nator war machine, though crippled, still had supporters among the galactic elite who saw humanity's ascension as a direct threat to their control. Meanwhile, the Tirith, once hesitant allies, had begun quietly withdrawing their support from the Free Systems Alliance, wary of humanity's rapid rise. They feared that humanity, despite its promises, would eventually seek to dominate the galaxy once more. Their leaders, divided, began to send covert signals that they might abandon humanity's cause if the situation didn't improve quickly. On Earth, Ward and Tiberius both understood that the peace they sought was fragile, too fragile to last without constant vigilance. But for the first time in many years, they saw a glimmer of hope. A new generation, born in the wake of the war, had risen up. They weren't consumed by the same hunger for conquest that had defined the previous generation. They were focused on something else: survival, cooperation, and peace. "Maybe this is what it means to be human," Ward said, speaking to Tiberius as they watched the sun rise over Earth's shattered but healing surface. "We don't conquer galaxies. We protect them. We build, not tear down." Tiberius, ever the optimist, nodded. "The galaxy may never forgive us, but perhaps we don't need their forgiveness. Perhaps we need to show them that we can be something better, something worth trusting." As the years passed, humanity began to fulfill its promise. Slowly, cautiously, the galaxy began to heal. The Free Systems Alliance grew in strength, and the borders that had once separated races began to blur. Empires that had long ruled through fear were replaced by systems of cooperation and mutual respect. The scars of war, though still present, faded with time as new generations of galactic citizens took the reins of power. Humanity had changed. The once reckless species that had waged war across the stars had become the protectors of peace. But their transformation wasn't just in their actions. It was in their hearts. For humanity, the true power was not in their weapons, but in their ability to learn from their mistakes and build a future where everyone had a chance to thrive. As the stars shone above, a new chapter began, one not defined by war, but by the potential for a galaxy united in peace. Humanity had taken the first step, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they had proven that even in the darkest of times, the light of hope could shine through.